I'm so excited to bring up next, and I know we're going to show the video or the photo that started everything for this woman who has, the more and more I learn about her, I am just blown away. And joining me on stage is going to be Heidi Lewis, who is an advocate and communications and advocacy expert. And I need to find if we can put up that photo. There it is. So this one, perfect, speaks volumes. There's so much here. And Heidi, I can't wait to bring you up so we can talk about this photo.
Oh man.
So tell me, how did that start it all before we say?
It still hurts. It still hurts to look at that photo. That was taken about a month into the pandemic. I was working from home, as was my husband, and had no childcare. My son was doing virtual kindergarten in the next room. And my daughter, who was then 1, needed something to do. And I was just desperate to send some emails out. And it was a rainy day. And so I dragged that water table in to the bathroom. I closed the door. I started to do some emails. I got myself in the tub because it was a good place to sit and prop all myself in my things up. And then my husband finished a conference call and came in and was like, what is this? And we thought it was funny at the time. I mean, it was a month into the pandemic, and he took a photo and, nothing came of it. We just sort of sat with it. And then closures dragged on, and childcare closures dragged on, and in-person schooling, was nowhere to be seen for months and months and months. And so at the 1-year anniversary of the pandemic, when everyone was sort of like charging ahead and talking about getting back to normal, and suddenly there was this big conversation bubbling up about, is childcare infrastructure? I was like, yes, let me show you a photo of what it looks like when a mother has to work without childcare. And so I just sort of launched it out there, and I was so humbled by how many people responded to it, and it sort of went everywhere. And it really opened my eyes to the fact that this wasn't a Heidi problem. This wasn't like I wasn't doing good enough. It wasn't that. It was that there's like a systemic failure to give us a safety net. My childcare was closed and I had nothing else, and I still had to work. And so it, really opened my eyes to the fact that this was a problem bigger than me, and introduced me to a lot of the great organizations and people who are working on this very thing to fix it.
It's such a quintessential photo that's going to live on, I think, when, hopefully you make it into the history book. So when our children, are studying in school about the pandemic, that's the one that makes it to the textbooks. That's my hope. And Heidi, I'm so excited because this panel is what we all need to hear. It's the building momentum for workplace and legislative change and care, presented by Mom Rising, Chamber of Mothers, and Delaware Law. So I'm going to turn it over to you. You've got powerhouse speakers, and I can't wait to hear what's coming up. And for those on this panel, remember, please keep putting those questions in the chat, and we will ask the panelists as we go on.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Kristen. We are here at Building Momentum for Workplace and Legislative Change and Care panel. And thank you so much to Mother Honestly partners, Vivi and Indeed, for bringing this panel together. As Kristen said, I'm Heidi Lewis. I'll be moderating this conversation. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm coming to you from my home office in Silver Spring, Maryland. It's actually Maryland Day today. And if I weren't moderating this panel, I'd be outside our state capitol building in Annapolis, rallying with my friends at Time to Care Maryland, which is a coalition fighting for the passage of a comprehensive paid family and medical leave bill in our state, which I've been volunteering with for the past year. We're so close to making 12 weeks a reality here, and I'm so excited. And I'm a volunteer with the coalition, as we've discussed, because of my bathtub. And as I said, it's sort of opened my eyes and connected me to the work that's going on out there, because I've spent every sort of working moment since trying to figure out how to get involved and make meaningful change for parents and caregivers. And it's hard as a free agent, a lay person, just a mom in Maryland, trying to figure out what I can do and what kind of effort is needed. But connecting with organizations like Moms Rising and Supermajority and Chamber of Mothers and Mother Honestly, I've been able to figure out what's going on and how I can get involved. But as we know, I tweeted that picture now over a year ago, and not all that much has changed. Which is why I'm especially excited to hear from our powerhouse panelists today who can address what legislative reform is needed to help working parents, especially moms, succeed in the workforce, and how we can get a safety net built up around us so that no mother has to work at home from the bathtub. So I'm going to bring up our four powerhouse women. I'm going to tell you who they are, and then I'm going to let them introduce themselves and give us the mother honest version of the work they're doing. So I'd like to introduce Liz Morris, the Deputy Director, Center for Work-Life Law.
Hi.
Hello. Kristen Rowe Finkbeiner, the Executive Director, CEO of Moms Rising.
Hello.
And Daphne Delvaux, employment lawyer from Delvaux Law.
Hi, everyone.
And Amanda Brown Learman, Executive Director of Supermajority and Supermajority Educational Fund.
Heidi, I'm so close to you. We should go after this to Annapolis.
Oh, really? Let's go. They'll be out there until 11:30. Do you think we can make it?
Good to know.
Okay, so if everyone could just kind of go around and introduce yourselves and give us the honest version of what your org does and the work that you're doing. We're speaking real today, right? So tell us a little bit about what you're doing, and then I'd like to just dive right in from there to talk about the biggest challenges facing working women today. So let's start with you, Liz. Tell us a little bit about Center for Work-Life Law.
Yeah, thanks, Heidi. I was super excited when I saw that that you were moderating this panel. It's like, I know this person from your image, but it's nice to be here with you and with all the other panelists. And thank you so much to Mother Honestly for bringing us all together for this conversation. I'm Liz Morris. I'm the Deputy Director at the Center for Work-Life Law. We are an advocacy and research organization that's housed at one of the University of California law schools in San Francisco. And we seek to advance gender and racial equity in the workplace and education. And the honest piece is that the way that we do that is through a caregiving lens, because caregiving is central, as we're seeing now during the pandemic, to gender and racial equity in the workplace and education. And so at the center, our director, Joan Williams, over the last 25 years has founded the center, and we've really pioneered the area of law that protects mothers and other family caregivers from discrimination. So we address structural inequality by changing public policy on the national level in states around the country. And we also conduct research, because we are housed at the law school. We also conduct research that influences courts, public officials, and business leaders.
Amazing. I might need you to unpack that a little further, because we're joined by such an incredibly diverse audience and so many professional, there's so much professional breadth in our audience. And I think it's just really helpful for us to speak, honestly about what it is, the work that we do. So I'd like to introduce Kristen from Moms Rising. And hi.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. So tell us, what's up with Mom Rising?
Well, I love that we're talking honestly about motherhood. Hello, we need to do that everywhere, all the time. And my Mother Honestly beginning story is that when I had my son, he was born with a primary immune deficiency, and I didn't have any paid family medical leave. So even though I thought I was going to go fairly immediately back to work, I was pushed out of the labor force, and getting childcare for a special needs kid was really hard. And so I was raised by a single mom and had this experience where if what had happened to me, being pushed out of the labor force and losing my job-linked healthcare right when I needed it the most, happened to my mom, then that would have been an outright unrecoverable disaster. And so it was a light bulb moment that luck alone should never determine if a family can thrive. And too often, luck alone does in the United States of America. Because, of course, 80% of people don't have access to a single paid family medical leave day. And we have really, really, really difficult situation with childcare costing more than college. So Moms Rising. Moms Rising was born when moms came together, moms telling moms, friends telling friends, people who love moms telling people who love moms, that we needed change. Our mission is to increase family economic security, decrease discrimination, and build a country where everyone can thrive. Through moms telling moms, friends telling friends, we've grown to over 1 million members in every state in the nation who are taking action on 3 different primary ways. 1, state and national legislative change. 2, electoral change, getting involved in voter engagement, making sure moms have access to voting and that as many moms as possible do vote. 3, corporate change. And actually there's a 4th one, which is cultural change, which is part of talking about these issues, making sure we're all understanding what's happening with moms in America. And we know that solutions are possible. So this is a really big, fun thing to bring up in the middle of a whole bunch of depressing statistics. So being a mom is a greater predictor of wage and hiring discrimination than gender. And moms of color are experiencing compounded wage and hiring discrimination due to structural racism, to the extent that Latina moms are earning just 46 cents to a white dad's dollar. This is ridiculous, but solutions are possible. Studies show that when we have access to paid family medical leave, to childcare, to healthcare, and to equitable healthcare, like is in the Momnibus, we actually help lower those wage gaps. Businesses prosper more, lives are saved, and things are awesome. So Moms Rising opens avenues for busy people to be heard. Our members made over 1,400,000 direct constituent contacts with Congress last year alone. And we're really excited to be in conversation and movement and collaboration with everyone on this panel, with tons of organizations, because we're not just building Moms Rising, of course, we're working together with everyone to build a movement. So thank you.
Sorry, I lost my mute button there. I want to bring up Daphne, our next panelist. Thank you so much, Kristen. Hi, Daphne.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm such a supportive mother, honestly. I'm Blessing and I are dear friends, and I'm happy to be here. So a little bit about me. I'm an employment lawyer, but my specialty is really maternal rights. And I represent mothers when they experience discrimination at work based on pregnancy, postpartum conditions, maternity leave, and any of those issues. Pretty much what I do is put employers on notice not to mess with moms. There will be consequences for forcing moms out of the workforce. And we do that by using the law and the power of the law to make sure employers follow the rules and follow the law, which they have to do, and they have to respect moms. So I do that through my own law firm. I own a law firm which is focused on women's rights. It's in fact the only law firm entirely devoted to helping women in litigation and trial. And I also host a platform which is educational for mothers to learn more about their rights and have access to scripts and handouts they can provide to their employers. And I'm also here to represent the Chamber of Mothers, which is a coalition to advocate for mothers' rights. And I'm also a mom. So my journey is similar. I've been in employment law for over a decade. And then when I became a mom, I was really confronted with the challenges that presented. As a mother working as a lawyer, it was not easy. And it prompted me to create a space to support all mothers so that we can remain committed to our career without sacrificing our health, both our physical and our mental health, as well as time with our children. And we do that by using the law creatively to support our lives and protect our jobs.
Amazing. Thank you, Daphne. And I love that all of our personal light bulb moments are coming into these introductions, because it's like, here's what got me on this journey. Here's how I got here, which is why I'm going to challenge Amanda, as she introduces herself, to do that. And then to springboard into the next part. What are the biggest problems you're seeing that women are facing? So after you introduce yourself, we know all about the amazing work Supermajority is doing. Tell us what the supermajority of women are facing and what the biggest challenges are right now.
Excellent. All right. Supermajority is a women's equality organization. We do training, we do leadership development, mobilization. That's advocacy at the state and local level and also at the national level, but more and more at the state and local level because the battleground is just shifting on so many of the things that we care about right now. We were founded by Cecile Richards, Jen Poo, who I know is coming to this later on today, which is awesome, and Alicia Garza to sort of meet the need of the surge of women's activism following the election of that orange monster in 2016, which was also the time that I was like, the only thing I can control is making more good progressive people. And so I'm going off birth control, and that started my own motherhood journey. I now have 3 young girls who are my greatest inspiration and also admittedly sometimes the greatest source of stress and frustration too. Here at Supermajority, we believe in the majority rules. That is that our lives are safe, our bodies are respected, our work is valued, our families are supported, and that our government should represent us. And we have the super rule, which is just that the lives and experiences of women, particularly women of color, should be front and center in solution making. We are building a multiracial coalition of women to be the voting bloc that is feared and revered in America, because they can ignore our primal screams, and sadly they do too often, even though they are very cathartic, and I do fully support that, but they cannot ignore our votes. We have over 500,000 members. We have an online community of 3.5 million people, which is amazing. And again, I'm a mom. And also one special thing about me is that I entered the caregiving world also as a doula. I got trained to be a doula to really support women in the journey, just like birthing is all about, and centering obviously this lovely new human that is coming into the world, but it's also about making moms, and they need to be cared for in that moment. And that's too often overlooked. So it's sort of a personal passion of mine, which gets me to the next question, Heidi. I think I'm sure this will come up. I can already hear Kristen and her like bellowing voice on this topic, but just paid leave. We have literally never been closer to having paid leave in America right now. It is the thing that I have fought for personally in every single job that I've had. I remember when I actually went to work at the DNC, I waddled in at 7 months pregnant, and they had a crappy paid leave policy. And I was like, no, we got to change this. And there's obviously an opportunity to do that sort of at that individual corporation, business, organizational level. But there's also a way to solve for that at the federal level. And again, we have never been closer to reaching that level of honestly, just like recognition about this issue in our country. The conversation has never been, it's been something that we've all been talking about, but we now have policymakers that are talking about it and capable of getting it over the finish line. So I would really prioritize paid leave. We've never been closer. And it's just like so past time to get this policy over the finish line.
I mean, amen. Amen. I mean, I know paid leave obviously affects so many people, but then I feel like it's sometimes hard to get people involved in the fight because they may happen to work for a company that gives them 6 months off. So they're okay, and I was sort of naive about it myself. When I had my first child, I had 3 months off with my last job. And then when I had my second child, I was only given 10 days, and I had to fight for that business to change. And they did change their policy to meet DC's upcoming leave that they were shifting into. And I think that was 2020. They were going to adopt a new policy. But I mean, how do you feel like, in addition to things like access to paid leave, what else are you seeing that's facing working parents? Perhaps the motherhood penalty, workplace discrimination. We're in a mess here. And I feel like in order to get through the problems, we should iron them out. And then I'd love to also then, shift in later in our conversation to what can be done and how we can all get involved and help. So Kristen, what are you seeing from the Moms Rising front? What do you hear your members saying are the biggest problems they're facing?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things is that we don't live single issue lives, so our struggle isn't a single issue, which is a very famous quote that I just want to lift up right now. And so what we're hearing is really the domino effect that happens when you have babies. So right now in the United States of America, because 80% of people don't have access to paid family medical leave, and only 8% of low-wage workers have access to this critical policy. So we have a lack of access to this policy and across many different factors. Because of that, there's often a domino effect where you're pushed out of the labor force when you have a baby, because what are you supposed to do if you don't have paid family medical leave? And then it's very hard to get back into the labor force with childcare costing more than college. And in fact, there's a barrier that people often don't bring up, and that is that infant childcare is the most expensive. And because of insurance barriers, many infant childcare facilities will not and cannot take an infant under the age of 6 weeks. So we have a situation where the domino falls when you have the baby. Now you're really busy. And so it's hard to have time to be an advocate. It's hard to have time to even, get the right amount of sleep that allows you to exist in the day. And then trying to get back in the labor force, childcare costs more than college. And then after that, we have the continued domino effect of what happens with access to healthcare, particularly equitable access to healthcare. Right now, we are the only World Health Organization in the world that has rising as in increasing maternal deaths. And that is happening in an inequitable way. Black women are dying 3 to 4 times as likely in childbirth as white women. So we have healthcare barriers as well. And we see those dominoes continue to fall throughout a person's lifetime. So we need not a single silver bullet solution. We need a whole bunch of policies, including the Paycheck Fairness Act, to also help deal with the wage and hiring discrimination that moms, and in particular, moms of color due to structural racism, face. But here's the good news. These solutions are entirely possible. Other countries have done it. 177 countries have paid family medical leave. 166 have paid sick days. Other countries have done it. Many states, as you mentioned, Heidi, Maryland, many other states are passing paid family medical leave policies. So we know these policies work in the United States of America, just not as well as internationally. We can do it too. And we moms know that we can do many things at the same time. We just recently lost U.S. Secretary of State, the first woman Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright. And I had the incredible honor of talking with her a couple years ago about motherhood and what it brought to her. And she noted that motherhood taught her more than anything else how to multitask. Very important. We can multitask and push forward many different policies at the same time, and we can win many different policies at the same time. Motherhood also taught her something very important that I think about every day, and that is how to stop disagreements on the playground. And one of the things that stuck with me is that our first U.S. Secretary of State, who is a woman and a mom, said she learned more negotiating playground disagreements than in any class that she ever had to take to get her professional degrees. So I just bring it to you that our problems and what we're hearing about are horrifying. Women are being pushed out of the labor force every day. We need the wages of moms to make ends meet. 3/4 of families actually rely on them. But the solutions are also possible, and we are a powerful, talented, amazingly strategic force when we unite together inside our organizations, across our organizations, between our organizations, and moving forward. So thank you.
It's absolutely true. We need all of each other to push these changes forward. And I think it's helpful to maybe put it into 2 buckets to think about what can be done sort of individually. Say if you are in a workplace, as I was, where I found out I was going to only be given 10 days of paid leave, how do you work to change that? And then how can everyday people fight for changes at the federal or legislative level? And I think maybe Liz and Daphne, if you could kind of weigh in and help illuminate some of the legal barriers or ways that we could advocate in our own workplaces.
Sure, happy to do that. I think that at least looking at the workplace, one common thread that sort of runs through all of these issues that we're talking about here is bias against mothers that many times isn't even illegal. By bias, I mean unfounded, unchecked assumptions that mothers aren't as reliable, they're not as committed to their jobs, that they should be home with their children. The stereotypes that lead managers to believe that mothers are not as valuable as employees when we know that is not true. There is a stockpile of research showing that mothers, as compared to non-mothers and compared to men, they're less likely to be hired. When they are hired, they have lower recommended salaries. They're less likely to be promoted. They have lower perceived competence and commitment, and there's higher professional expectations for them. And there are so many ways that this bias manifests in the workplace, as retaliation for using that paid leave that your employer has given you, as pay inequities, as failure to accommodate people during their pregnancy, or for lactation when they need changes at work for their health or for their baby's health. It is bias against mothers that drives all of these forms of discrimination. And so I think that protections for mothers against this form of bias is absolutely critical. As you said, Heidi, at the outset, this isn't a Heidi problem. It's not a Liz problem. It's not an individual mother's problem. We, as mothers, I think, have tactics that we use to cope with our broken system. We're all familiar with them, but really what we need, this is a problem with our public policies and our workplaces. And so I think that we need systemic solutions. So thinking about that bias that I mentioned, an important system level intervention is really simple, making discrimination on the basis of that bias illegal. In other words, prohibiting discrimination against mothers in the workplace. I think sometimes people are surprised to hear that it's not in all cases illegal to discriminate because somebody is a mother. A third of the American workforce is covered by a law, a state or a local law. We don't have one at the national level, but covered by a law that makes it illegal to not hire somebody because they're a mother, not give them equal pay because they're a mother, not promote them because they're a mother. But that still leaves 2/3 of the workforce without that clear, necessary protection. I'll just give you an example from our legal helpline at the Center for Work-Life Law that's related to the pandemic. In April 2020, things were closing down. The janitorial staff at a hotel chain were laid off, they were furloughed. So there was an understanding that they would be coming back when things picked up. Okay, that's understandable, really hard, but there were, no customers at the hotel. And then when things started picking back up again, everybody but the mothers were called back. Nobody called the mothers to check if they were available, if they wanted to come back to work. In fact, many of them did want to come back to work, and they needed to support their families financially. As I'm sure you could have guessed, nobody made an assumption that the fathers weren't available to come into work because they had kids doing remote schooling or whatever. And then they ultimately hired other people to replace these mothers. And as Kristen said at the outset, losing your job because of motherhood can, in many cases is absolutely devastating. It's a driver of poverty, and it should be illegal in all cases. In this situation, those folks did live in or work in a jurisdiction that had one of these laws, but many people don't, and it can be really hard, if not impossible, to get them legal help.
Daphne, have you provided legal help to people who have been in these situations? Could you, without revealing any of your clients, tell us a little bit about some of this work?
I echo a lot about this bias, and really the only way to solve the bias is for men to take advantage of the rights and the policies that are available to them. During the pandemic, it was really only women calling me. And there was a law available at the time, a temporary law, FFCRA, which provided access to limited paid leave for childcare disruptions. And this was available to all parents, but it was only women calling me asking for guidance. And that was really disheartening. It's because women are assumed to be caregivers that they are hired less, that they are fired more. And that's a societal problem we can't solve today, but that is, in terms of the bias, is something that I see as well. Another problem I see is that children do not stop needing their parents when they're not babies anymore. So even in a paid leave state like California, women still get fired all the time, just when the kids are a little bit older. And there's no protections for childcare disruptions right now. There's no protections for your kids being home because they're sick. And we just see incredible disruptions to women's careers when the babies are a little bit older. What I see is that employers are usually fairly careful after the baby's born. I mean, women get fired for having babies, but what employers like to do, because they're not, it would be kind of insensitive and a little bit stupid, is to fire a woman right after she had birth, is they wait a little bit. And then after a couple of months have passed, that's when the termination happens. And it's very hard at that time to assert rights, because there is really no right for having childcare disruptions and not being able to go to work. Really what we need is some sort of flexibility right. And we really need fathers to step up. But the way that I've been able to help women is by using the law creatively. And we do that actually by relying on disability rights. So any sort of stress, anxiety, depression, that can be a basis to take either protected time off or request an accommodation, either teleworking, a modified schedule. So instead of saying, oh, I can't go to work, or I need a modified schedule because I have childcare disruptions, what I tell them to say is, the stress, anxiety, depression caused by these childcare disruptions entitle me to an accommodation under my disability rights. So it's a little bit of a turnaround. We can also use these rights to extend a leave on the basis of stress, anxiety, and depression. And a lot of my clients have taken 7 to 10 months of paid time off, relying on their disability rights. So even though we don't have a comprehensive framework for parents and parents' rights, we do actually have a very strong and robust disability rights framework that we can often rely on. Something else I do, even though there's usually no protections for parental leave status, is there are protections under Supreme Court case law for what we call gender plus, which can apply in the motherhood context. So if there's policies that are disproportionately impacting only mothers, that in and of itself can be a gender discrimination issue. So the law is flawed. It is imperfect. There's a lot to be desired, but there's still things we can do. So that's where my work exists, is both advocating for more, but also using what we have.
Daphne, I feel like you're about to get a lot more busy. It was like the light bulb went off for me, though, because so much of what we're all going through right now is not protected under law, because these problems are new, a lot of them, the childcare problem particularly. And I've seen a lot of questions coming in from the audience about this sort of childcare problem. And because it's not considered a legal right, but it affects the way we're able to do our jobs. And I know there are a lot of people in the audience who are struggling right now because they may be getting called back into work, and they may still have an unreliable, unstable childcare situation, but legally they have to show up at work. And they're not necessarily protected in saying, well, I can't, I don't have childcare. So what do we do? I mean, I'm going to throw it back to everyone, because I know this childcare is something we really want to talk about. So how do we sort of change the narrative? How do we work this in, that it's essential to the way we do our jobs? And can we talk about the fact that there is this bias against mothers, especially mothers of color, that, that this childcare is essential, and we really, really need it to do our jobs. So I'm going to kind of just throw it back out to everyone and hope that we can get into this a bit.
Well, I will say that in my mind, as a policy advocate, the gold standard that we want to be working toward is accommodations for family caregivers, for mothers, in the same way that we see accommodations for people with disabilities. There's actually a bill pending in California right now, AB 2182, introduced by Assembly Member Buffy Wicks, that in instances where a school is unexpectedly closed or a child care facility is unexpectedly unavailable, it's not just COVID in California. We have earthquakes, we have wildfires that produce so much smoke that things get shut down for a few days. In those instances, an employee would be entitled to a reasonable accommodation to take care of their child or their family member with a disability. And so, I think that that's sort of the future where we're going. In San Francisco, there's a law that provides that right to reasonable accommodation for caregiving in general. There doesn't even have to be an unexpected closure. But I think before we get to that place, we really need just to have basic anti-discrimination protections. In other words, you cannot treat mothers differently when they have childcare situations come up compared to how you're treating other employees who want to train for a marathon. And so they want to work for home, or whose, roof is leaking, so they need to clean the flood in their garage. We see that because of this bias, mothers aren't given the same flexibility and permissions that other employees are getting when things come up in their lives. And that's often currently illegal.
Totally agree, and want to jump in that this is an area, childcare is a prime example, where we often have seen this issue area framed as being women or moms' fault. That because we can't make it all work, because it's an impossible situation, that it is somehow only on the individual to try to figure everything out, which is impossible. So this is a situation where we can see that when this many people across the entire country are having the same problems, the same crisis, the same struggles at the same time, we don't have an epidemic of personal failures. We have national structural issues that we can and must solve together. And we are seeing childcare solutions moving forward. They're moving forward too slowly for the emergency that we face, but we are moving forward, and they're moving forward because of the voices of moms. Now, we are in a crisis because childcare has three prongs that aren't working. There's a problem with access, the childcare deserts, where no matter where you live, you can't even find a childcare facility. Those childcare deserts are growing. There's affordability, we've talked about. Childcare costs more than college. That's ridiculous. And then there's the quality of childcare and paying childcare workers, who are usually moms, living wages. Childcare workers are some of the lowest paid people in the United States of America, and that is not okay. Care workers need to earn living wages. So we get to this frame shift into the hope and the rising hope and the change that's going to happen because of everybody who's listening, everybody who's on this panel. We need everybody's voices. And that is that we are seeing policies move forward at the state and federal level. And the omnibus legislation that just passed Congress, for example, we just had $5 billion more investment in childcare come through without even a big fight. That is a frame shift, people. That's because moms, dads, people who love moms are raising their voices. So this ball is moving forward slowly. But the problem is, let me just state it, a problem of infrastructure. We know that just like we need to build bridges and roads to drive on, to go to work, we need to build the care infrastructure. That includes childcare, paid family medical leave, home and community-based services for people who are disabled and the elderly, because many of us are in a sandwich generation of caregiving for both those who are younger than us and older than us, so that parents can go to work, to those much needed jobs, so that children can thrive, so that dogs can interrupt conversations online, and so that care workers, importantly, can earn living wages. Now, we are not alone in seeing that we need a care infrastructure, and this is where there's hope. The Federal Reserve chairperson, Jerome Powell, just recently said that the United States of America needs to build the care infrastructure, particularly childcare, so that we can have better competitiveness internationally. And study after study are coming out showing that in order to address inflation, we need to address the fact that parents, especially moms, are being pushed in and out of the labor force because we don't have access to this care infrastructure. When we're pushed in and out of the labor force, we have an unstable labor force as a whole, because hello, we're 50% of the labor force. And then what happens is we have supply chain issues, which drive up inflation. So this isn't just the right thing to do for parents, for us. It's the smart thing to do for businesses and for our economy. And together, we can make these changes. Like Amanda said, we're on the precipice of being able to pass national paid family medical leave. We're on the precipice of having free pre-K for all 3 and 4-year-olds and affordable childcare that costs no more than 7% of your income in Congress right now. And these changes are happening again because everybody is listening, everybody who's posting on Twitter, everybody who's speaking out on Instagram, everybody who's together, just not giving up and being persistent. There's power in persistence, and there's power in persistence in childcare changes. And just want to go back and state that this is clearly important because we went into the pandemic with our care infrastructure hanging by a thread, and that thread unraveled altogether. The data is in, and it's had an outsized impact on women and moms, with women of color experiencing compounded health and economic harms due to structural racism. But we can help solve this, and that's what gives me hope, seeing the hope and the change moving every day. So thank you.
Thank you. I think this is where we need to wrap up is to really hear what we can do and how to get involved. Amanda, please tell us.
I was just going to say one other perspective that I do think is important to put into the group, and then Heidi will also answer your question, is just that 2/3 of minimum wage workers in America are women. Those sorts of accommodations and like the conversation around accommodations, like we need solutions. We need solutions desperately. And the fact that Congress is having this conversation right now, that we are so close, like we need every single person on this to share their story, to make a phone call to their senator, to talk to every other mom or mom that they love, mom that they know, caregiver, parent, partner, all of the things, to make that same phone call, because we need to get this over the finish line so that we're actually talking about solutions, and that those of us, literally all of us on this line, are like also in a state of privilege. There are so many women, so many moms that don't even know that this conversation is happening, but would benefit so deeply. And the fact that we can also help make change, bring this conversation to the forefront for them, for solutions for those that are so deeply impacted by this every single day. And like Liz, those accommodations, like don't even get it won't help us. We need more. We need even more. And we're close. We're having that conversation. In terms of, things that folks can do, there's definitely individual level things. I've done all the things of challenging status quo. I love making people uncomfortable by bringing my babies to meetings and nursing I've done it in front of congressmen. I've had Tom Perez text me I'm leaking in a meeting before. I'm all about it. I have taken all of my leave and some, even if you are ready to go back to work, model taking leave when you have it. Create a support system for those that are at your workplace with you. We have a Supermom Slack channel in our team, which is literally where I get so much energy during the day, just being able to relate to my own colleagues. I remember even at the beginning of the pandemic, constantly trying to create a Zoom background with the immaculate kitchen behind me, as opposed to the piles of laundry, which you can see behind me now. So I'm just getting more real with it. But you can get involved with any number of our organizations. You can join Supermajority. We are constantly mobilizing folks, working very closely with Moms Rising. I love the Chamber of Mothers content. I'm always the first to like that in the morning. But share your story, call the folks that are in power. Our government should represent us, and they need to hear from us in order to do that. And again, join and follow any number of these organizations.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you. And it's so worth pointing out to people who aren't familiar with these organizations that you guys make it really easy to give everyday people sort of scripts and prompts and places to start. I mean, I didn't know what to do when I called my congressperson to say I was working in my bathtub, but then I sort of used a script for Moms Rising to talk about why childcare is infrastructure and why it's so important. So it's great to know that these resources are out there. And I thank you for sharing that with us and for directing everyone today to how they can get involved. I have talked so much. I cannot believe we have to wrap. I am so sad. I want to like just give everyone 20 more minutes to talk. But I think we have to wrap. So if everyone could just give, like, Kristen, do we even have time for people to give a minute, or are we done? Are we out of here? Oh, you're muted.
That mute button's going to get all of us all day. So ladies, what we're going to do, we got so many fabulous questions from the audience. We're going to take the time and I'm going to follow up with all of you directly right after this for some more shares of that, because a lot of the audience is looking for those resources, all of those talking points, and you all have so much to give. So we'll handle it that way. We'll send it out as additional content after the summit. Thank you.